I like to say there are three firsts when it comes to becoming an anime fan. There's the first anime you ever watch, which is usually like Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh! Or something. There's the first anime you watch once you have an understanding of what anime is, which for me was Attack on Titan. And then, finally, you have your gateway anime. The show that makes you say, I want to see more series and films just like this one. And for me, that was Sword Art Online. I've been in love with SAO since the first time I watched it, and my relationship with it directly mirrors my relationship with art. Every time my perspective on art has changed, so has my perspective on SAO. Every time I think I've got it figured out, I find something new to love. Something new to dig into and analyze until I'm left feeling like I could fill a whole ass book with my thoughts on this incredible series. So, shit. Here we go. I mean, hey, I'm already in the middle of one multi-part analysis of an anime I love. Why not two? When Kirito first logs into SAO, he sees it as the ultimate form of escapism. And that's because Kirito's always had a strained relationship with reality. When you're a kid, you tend to see the world in absolutes, and these absolute assumptions serve as the framework for our view of reality. And for a lot of kids, the biggest absolute is the love of your family. But what if that love is a lie? It's a question Kirito can't stop himself from asking after he learns that his parents aren't really his parents, but his aunt and uncle. Was the love they offered him genuine, or just pity stemming from the death of his parents? When you're an adult, it's easy to dismiss the answer to that question as obvious. But when you're a kid, being part of a family is so natural and expected that you never think to question it. It's your reality. But that reality was shattered for Kirito when he learned the truth of his birth. And while this moment does leave Kirito with a lot of anguish, it also leaves him with a question. If something as certain as a family can turn out to be a fabrication, what even is reality? It's that question which ultimately leads him to SAO, as his fascination with the simulated reality of online games is brought to its logical extreme. In a weird way, I think Kirito saw his family life as a kind of simulated reality, and his interest in SAO comes from his desire to see what this intentionally simulated reality would feel like. It's escapism, no question about it, but not a self-destructive escapism. He genuinely wanted to be Klein's friend, but Kirito has a bad habit of undervaluing himself. After the revelation of his birth parents pushed him away from his family, Kirito can't stop himself from feeling like he'll never really know another person. And that acts as a barrier between him and the other people in his life. Kirito and Klein's departure on SAO's launch day isn't anyone's fault. Klein holds no enmity toward Kirito for leaving him behind, but Kirito can't stop himself from seeing it as an example of his cowardice. There's a contradiction at the core of his being, where he wants to connect with others, but keeps convincing himself he's unworthy or incapable of forming such connections. And the world of Aincrad doesn't make resolving this conflict any easier. The growing stigma toward beta testers just serves as one more buffer between Kirito and the world around him. The angry arguments from the likes of Kibawa and Joe just serves to compound his guilt. Even if there's a part of him that wants to push back against the assumptions made about beta testers, his departure from Klein serves as evidence to Kirito that maybe their accusations hold some weight. This idea that the reality Kirito is presented with isn't wholly true comes up constantly through the Aincrad arc, and Sword Art Online as a whole, where every time Kirito feels like he's reached a conclusion, something happens to pull the rug out from under him. And this first happens in the halls of the first floor labyrinth, when Kirito happened upon a shooting star. Do well in middle school so you can get into a good high school. And do well in high school so you can get into a good college. And do well in college so you can get a good job. And after that, before logging into SAO, Asuna never really lived her own life. She just followed the path her parents laid out for her. Even her joining the game wasn't some grand declaration of independence, it was a fluke. Regardless of intent, however, Asuna became a part of the death game. And for all the fear and despair that brings her, it also gives her something very important. Freedom. In SAO, Asuna has nothing. No skills, no knowledge, no family, no expectations. But that also means she has everything to gain, and that leads to her choosing to fight for her freedom. Even though Aincrad seems insurmountable, and she fully expects to die in the labyrinth's walls, Asuna decides to fight on the front lines instead of waiting for someone else to end the game. And it's that ambition which carries her through the first floor labyrinth, fighting monsters and honing her skills until she collapses from exhaustion. When she wakes up, however, what greets her isn't the cold stone walls of the dungeon, but the face of a young man. Kirito and Asuna's initial relationship is something the first progressive novel puts heavy focus on, and it gives a lot of insight into Asuna's thoughts and actions. Aincrad is a world full of trials and opportunities, but Asuna can only see it as an obstacle, a trap designed for the sole purpose of stealing her life. It's why she dedicates herself so much to her conquering of the dungeon, breaking sword after sword. When she takes a minute to actually experience this world, however, that swiftly begins to change. Simply experiencing some of the amenities available in this world is enough to start breaking her of this fatalistic mindset. I want to have another bath before I die, or I want to eat another good meal. It seems silly, sure, but it shows how Asuna's view of this world is slowly expanding. By the time Kirito and Asuna are challenging the first boss, her attitude toward fighting has markedly shifted, and it's easy to see why. Before, everything Asuna had was given to her by her parents, even her dreams. Aincrad may have forcefully trapped Asuna and 10,000 others, but it gives its prisoners free rein to fight, to reach the next floor, eat tons of tasty food, and have a nice bath at the end of the day. They're all her choices. Early on in the first SAO progressive novel, Kirito ponders about the core of the survivors he's met on his journey so far, and if it wasn't abundantly clear already, for Asuna, that core is freedom. To continue living her way, even in this simulated reality, that's how Asuna lives in Aincrad, and Kirito admires that deeply. Even as soon as the first floor boss, Kirito sees Asuna's potential, and knows she's the kind of person who can lead the players of Aincrad, just like Diavel. But then, of course, Diavel dies, and even after he and Asuna defeat Ilfang, the resentment towards beta testers sours this victory. Once again, something Kirito saw as true was revealed to be a fabrication, and just like when he was a child, it makes him withdraw into himself. Now with the stigma of Beater following him around, Kirito has every reason to be alone. Except...
Your name's Kirito.
Yeah.
I'm so dumb. It was there the whole time and I never knew.
There was one thing about Aincrad that's always been real, and it's this growing relationship. Sure, Kirito and Asuna don't truly partner up until later, but I believe this simple, small interaction helps Kirito begin to see the reality of Aincrad, the same way his friendship with Klein did at the very start. And now that I've covered Aria of a Starless Night in nauseating detail, this seems like the perfect time to take a detour I like to call... Forget the movies for a sec. First one's great and second one's fine, but the light novels are fucking peak fiction. I'll fight you about this. Seriously, the amount of SAO fans who haven't even touched the source material is frankly criminal. If you're an SAO fan, do yourself a favor, click off this video, open a new tab, and buy yourself the progressive light novels. Or if you're not sure about spending money, grab some volumes from your library. They probably have some. Point is, you need to read this shit. It's some of the most engaging fantasy storytelling you can experience. Every character is lovable, every novel is electric. Expect videos on Kismel and Argo at some point. To get this analysis back on track though, let's start by talking about the whole Beater thing. Kirito puts on his whole villain act because he thinks it's necessary in order to protect the other former beta testers, like his friend Argo, from witch hunts and persecution. But like, is it really? The novels frequently ask this question, and it ends up clouding the waters somewhat about Kirito's Beater persona. There are definitely players among the front lines that resent the beta testers, like Joe, but more often than not, their reaction is far more ambivalent than what Kirito expects. On Floor 2, for example, Neza doesn't even know who Kirito is, despite his supposed infamy. On Floor 3, Lind recognizes Kirito's efforts, even if he doesn't call him a friend. Hell, even Kibao, the man most representative of the beta tester persecution, has begrudging respect for Kirito, and even goes so far as to protect him from the most volatile players among the front lines. The further you go into the story, the more obvious it becomes that a big part of why Kirito took on the title of beater is because he just doesn't hold much value in himself, and the novels go out of their way time and again to show him how destructive that mindset is. On Floor 5, after Kirito's been forced again and again to mediate the tension between the ALS and DKB, Asuna offers Kirito her support, and he breaks down into tears in her arms. It's such a goddamn cathartic moment, and it's rewarding to watch him slowly open himself up more and more the longer he spends with Asuna and his growing number of friends. Like Kismel, the NPC knight who shows Kirito and Asuna both what it means to really live in this world. Or Argo, that precocious mercenary who nevertheless remains a steadfast companion for the whole of Aincrad. Hafner, Litten, Orochi, and the rest of the Floor 5 raid party give Kirito the hope that a unified Aincrad really is possible. And with every new relationship and adventure, the reality of Aincrad is put into clear focus. No matter what world you may be occupying, things are always changing, and that can make it really hard to be certain of where we stand at any given time. Is the place I'm at now only temporary? Can I ever truly know another person? Will the effort I put into really amount to anything? These are the questions constantly plaguing Kirito. But as we readers continue to progress the floors of Aincrad with him, it becomes obvious that we'll probably never have clear answers to those questions. But if we use that as an excuse to limit ourselves and stop trying to reach for what we want, we're only living half a life. Only by expanding our definitions of what we think is possible can we reach our full potential. And sure, living like that means sometimes our worst fears are proven right, but it also lets our greatest dreams be realized. Unfortunately, it takes Kirito a long time to figure this out. Even as his friendship with Asuna deepens and he continues to form bonds with others, Kirito can't stop himself from keeping a certain amount of distance. In the novels, Kirito's narration frequently mentions how he views his partnership with Asuna as temporary. He sees the two of them as being from completely different worlds, unable to truly coexist with someone as brilliant and powerful as Asuna. The progressive novels haven't yet reached this point, but it's not hard to imagine that this very mindset is what ultimately led the two of them to initially part ways after the 25th floor boss fight. Again and again, Kirito seems to have forged a strong bond with another person, but he just can't keep himself from pulling away at the very end. It's frustrating, but intentionally so, and very clearly a product of Kirito's struggle to create any kind of convincing reality for himself. He'll get there eventually, but it'll take a lot of struggling, and more than a little help from others. And it starts with the moonlit black cats. When Kirito happens upon Sachi and the rest of the Black Cats, he's been adventuring on his own for some time. Seeing the warmth present in their interactions, the familiar camaraderie they share with each other, it's easy to see why he'd accept when they choose to extend that to him. Like with Kismel, Asuna, Argo, and beyond, the Black Cats invariably brighten Kirito's world. And like all those others, they also offer him a new perspective on life in the steel castle of Aincrad. At this point in the story, Kirito's gone fairly native. He views Aincrad as a living, breathing world. There's this exchange between Kirito and Asuna in the first progressive novel, where Kirito posits that after enough boss raids and quests, the act of fighting in Aincrad would become natural, just another part of their routine. And this is very much true for Kirito by this point in the story. The same cannot be said for Sachi, however. Her fear of death is paralyzing, and that's not something Kirito has experienced. Their interactions remind Kirito that Aincrad's taken away just as much as it's given, in more ways than one. The deaths of Sachi and the rest are Kirito's lowest point, unquestionably. To him, it's the culmination of every single one of his failings. His inability to open up to others, his beater status. All of it came together and led to the deaths of these people he came to care so much about. But that's just one interpretation, you know? In her final message to him, Sachi claims responsibility for her death, saying it was her own weak heart that led to her demise, and choosing to at least try and take that burden off Kirito's shoulders. And that's always been a bad habit of his. He keeps placing unnecessary weight onto himself, and refuses to acknowledge the agency of others. During his early partnership with Asuna, he was so caught up in potentially damaging her reputation because of his beater persona, to the point where she basically had to sit him down and say to his face that she's capable of making her own decisions, and that she wants to stay with him. Sachi just must the same thing with her final message. And while it doesn't wholly heal Kirito's fragile heart, it does push aside the near suicidal depression her death caused. That healing would eventually come to be, however. It just takes a lot of helping hands. First, from Silica, who helps to remind Kirito that he has people and things worth fighting for in both the real world and the virtual. Then he reforges his friendship with Asuna, finally recognizing that she's a part of his life, and likely always will be. And that's all great, but if Kirito's going to reach his full potential and fully live his life, he needs to believe his life is worth living, that he has value as more than just a set of big numbers that fights real good. The answer is surprisingly simple. You have him look in a mirror. Guys, no bullshit, this is the most important episode in the Aincrad arc, genuinely. I'm not going to spend the next several minutes explaining why. Kirito and Lisbeth have very different lives within the world of SAO, but they are so incredibly alike. Lisbeth is searching for something she can claim as real, just the same as Kirito. But just like Kirito, there's an invisible distance she puts between herself and the world around her. The pair of them are kind of existing in a translucent bubble. They can see and hear the things around them, but they have a hard time letting anything punctuate that barrier. You can see that in their early interactions with each other. Lisbeth's a plucky blacksmith and Kirito's an aloof swordsman. These roles are ones they've become used to playing in this virtual world. And why not? It's just a virtual world. The people they meet here they'll likely never see again, so what's the point in being genuine with another player? And even if you are, how can you know the person you're talking to is being genuine themselves? Those kinds of questions permeate their every interaction. However, as they continue to interact, they slowly draw things out of each other they thought were long since buried. Lisbeth doesn't usually get this involved when it comes to her business, but now here she is going on an adventure with a complete stranger. Kirito has a hard time connecting with others because he places the burden of their safety on his shoulders, and even as he has to protect Liz from danger, that familiar weight never really settles. She's funny, she's charming, and she's determined. Those traits pass through whatever shields Kirito keeps up and turn her into a friend, someone he's happy just to spend time with. And the same holds true for Lisbeth. Trapped at the bottom of the dragon's nest, the warmth of Kirito's hand feels so real. In a world where everything is artificial, ruled by the cardinal system, there's still undefinable things that we nevertheless know to be true. The sword Lisbeth propped up as her masterpiece easily shattered upon the elucidator Kirito saw as an extension of his will. It was, after all, only a product, but Dark Repulsor was a blade forged from Lisbeth's soul. It was created with someone in mind.
It's real heavy. It's a good sword.
Yay!
It feels like you forged your soul into it.
The whole time he's been in Aincrad, hell, ever since he was a kid, Kirito's always been searching for something he can call real. And in this moment with Lisbeth, trapped inside of a virtual world, he's finally found it. The bond he's formed with her, Asuna, Silica, Kismel, and all the other friends and enemies he's made in his journey, they were all real, and he's had an impact on their lives the same way they have his. Kirito finally understands the value of his life, and he's glad he can share that life with others.
See, I don't know. I always thought dying was better than surviving day after day. Living with the guild.
Kirito.
But then, we got stuck in that hole, and I was really happy we were still alive.
This comes across in more than just his words. After Lisbeth flubs her confession to Kirito, she runs, not unlike how a certain swordsman ran away from his first friend in this world. However, this time Kirito refuses to let things end this way. After the first floor boss raid, Kirito took on the mantle of beater, in part to keep others at a distance. But when someone he's come to see as a friend tries the same, he's ready to reach out, and he's rewarded for that action. I genuinely don't think Kirito and Lisbeth's friendship would have been as strong as it is if he hadn't taken the time to console her in this moment. Now, all that's left for him to do is extend that courage a little further to the most important person in his life. It's not a fucking revelation to say that Kirito and Asuna's relationship makes up the core of the Aincrad arc, so it's only natural that it's put into focus for the last act of this story. After resolving the situation with Griselda, Kirito and Asuna managed to rekindle their friendship from a year before. However, this current Asuna isn't the same solo fencer Kirito mentored so long ago. She's the vice commander to the Knights of the Blood, a shining ray of hope to the people of Aincrad, just as Kirito always believed she could be. But now that guild has started to become a prison, much like the prison Asuna once saw Aincrad as. Back then, she broke free of said prison by finding a goal all her own, and giving it her all to reach it. Here, though, it's a little trickier. After all, even though Asuna has come to treasure her life in Aincrad, she still wants to beat the game, to lead the trapped players of Aincrad to the real world. So it's not like she can just quit the guild and go back to doing her own thing, right? Except there's Kirito, still playing solo on the front lines, living in Aincrad in a way nobody else really does. Asuna wants to live like that. She wants to live with Kirito, and after seeing her naked concern for him after the boss fight with the Gleam Eyes, Kirito wants to live with her as well. They complement each other so perfectly. Kirito opens Asuna's mind to the full scope of her potential, and Asuna refuses to let Kirito's self-abusive tendencies get the better of him. You can see it in the moment Kirito confesses his guilt over the moonlit black cats, and Asuna comforts him. In that moment, Kirito can't bring himself to return her embrace, once again held back by his self-doubt. But when a similar instance occurs after the two get together, he's finally confident enough to return the love Asuna so freely gives. Kirito finally understands that whether real or virtual, this is his reality. He's not a blight on those around him, or a selfish beater who only cares about his own achievements. He's a husband and friend, a hero, in the most unflatteringly natural sense of the word. But his life with Asuna isn't quite complete yet, not until a young girl finds her way into their home. Yui is the final culmination of everything Aincrad explores. After all, she's just a program, an AI mental health counseling unit meant to simulate human emotions. Everything about her is artificial, so loving her is pretty silly, right? Not to Kirito and Asuna. No amount of superficial labels or cardinal systems or whatever will stop the love they feel for their daughter. The memories they shared together are real, and worth fighting for. And that's exactly what Kirito does here. Throughout his time in Aincrad, Kirito's always been fighting to find a vision of reality that he believes to be true, and he's found it with his family here, so he'll fight like hell to keep it.
Cardinal! No! Kayaba! You're gonna find out things don't always go the way you want them to!
Kirito and Kayaba may not share the most screen time together in the Aincrad arc, but their conflict has existed throughout this whole narrative, truthfully. I feel like a lot of people really misinterpret Kayaba's whole "I forgot the reason why" line. And I mean a lot of people. Like, so many people. Like, damn near everyone who watched this show. Holy shit. The thing is, Kayaba's paramount ambition, for as long as he can remember, was to bring the steel castle he saw in his dreams to life. That castle was so much more real to him than almost anything he experienced in the physical world. And he does manage to make his dream a reality, but Kayaba's failings come from his short-sightedness. He created the world of Aincrad, sure, and even managed to populate it with people who live real lives and experience real consequences. But he never truly allowed himself to experience the world he'd created. Because of that, he believed unfalteringly in the systems of Aincrad, even relied on them, what with his system protection. Kirito, however, always sought to surpass those systems. He never accepted that his existence in this world was nothing more than a set of numbers and skills. All his greatest victories and achievements came from powers outside the overbearing rules of Cardinal, whether they came from his intelligence, willpower, or the bonds he shared with others. Kirito continually molded the world of Aincrad to best suit his needs, and because of that, he was able to craft a life for himself in this virtual world.
And that's when I realized something. Even in a world like this, he was really living. He wasn't losing a day in the real world. He was gaining a day. Here.
That's the question at the heart of the duel between Kirito and Kaiba. Are we chained by the systems that create our world, or is the human spirit capable of surpassing those systems and creating a new reality? Up until the literal second he's defeated, Kaiba believed it was the former, but Kirito always believed in his ability to define his own reality, even though the loss of his wife made him stumble briefly. God, what a powerful moment. Kirito wants so desperately to be the hero Asuna believed in, to rage against Kaiba and win the day, but he can't help the overpowering shock following her loss. But even when he thought she was dead, Asuna's life and will still lived within Kirito's heart, and the sword in his hand. On the second floor, Kirito tells Asuna that his sword's soul can live on even after it's been destroyed, and it's that sword, representative of the bond between Kirito and Asuna, that shattered Kaiba's system into a million pieces. Sword Art Online is one of the most inspirational series I've ever experienced in my life, and I'm never going to be embarrassed to admit that. At its core, it's a story about pushing back against the assumed truths of our world in order to create our best life. To look at all the problems we shrug off with a simple, "that's life," and tell us that's bullshit. To demonstrate that humanity's capabilities truly are limitless. We can create whatever reality we want. We just have to be brave enough to believe it's possible. And after having lived through this narrative, I believe it. I have no limits. We have no limits. Art has no limits. Thank you, Reki Kawahara. Thanks, Sword Art Online.